The military courtroom was suffocatingly silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears harder than any shout. I had barely taken 3 steps inside when I saw the sneer stretch across Commander Harold Pierce's face. He leaned back in his chair, smug and confident, as if the outcome had already been signed, sealed, and buried. Everyone in the room thought they knew the story. Lieutenant Natalie Hayes, a once promising officer, now accused of insubordination, misconduct, and actions unbecoming of her rank. They believed Pierce's lies. They believed my career, my honor, my entire future in uniform would be extinguished before the day was over. But then it happened. Colonel Samuel Brooks, presiding over the tribunal, froze mid-sentence as his eyes locked on me. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the edge of the bench, and his voice fell into a hush barely above a whisper. "Wait, is that her?" The words rippled through the courtroom like an explosion. Every soldier straightened at once. The stenographer's hands stilled. Even the officers at Pierce's table faltered, their pens hovering in midair. Because in that instant, they realized who I was. Not just the woman Pierce had tried to silence. Not just another officer being dragged through the mud. I was the very name engraved on the Medal of Honor, a living legacy they had all sworn to respect. And Pierce, who had built his entire case on deception, suddenly looked as if the ground beneath him had cracked wide open. My attorney, Major Amanda Collins, glanced at me with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. She had been assigned to my case just 3 days ago and had spent every waking hour trying to piece together a defense from the mountain of falsified evidence Pierce had fabricated. I hadn't told her about my past, about the mission. Some things were still classified, buried deep in Pentagon files marked with the highest security clearances. Some things I wasn't supposed to talk about, even to save myself. "Lieutenant Hayes," Colonel Brooks continued, his voice now steady but different, tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Please approach the bench." The walk to the front of the courtroom felt like crossing a minefield. Eyes followed my every move, some hostile, some confused, some suddenly filled with dawning recognition. My dress blues felt too tight around my throat, and the weight of my service ribbons, the only decorations I was permitted to wear publicly, seemed to press against my chest like accusations. Commander Pierce rose quickly. "Sir, with all due respect, this proceeding has already begun and—" "Silence, Commander." Brooks didn't raise his voice, but the steel in it cut through Pierce's objection like a blade. "Lieutenant Hayes, this tribunal has been convened to address serious charges brought against you by Commander Pierce. Before we continue, I need to clarify something." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Are you the same Lieutenant Hayes who served in Operation Northern Shield 6 years ago?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Operation Northern Shield. Even the name was supposed to be classified. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs as I answered, "Yes, sir." Something changed in Brooks's eyes. Recognition, followed by what looked almost like reverence. "I see," was all he said, but the 2 simple words carried the weight of mountains. He turned to the tribunal members, 3 senior officers who had been watching the exchange with growing confusion. "This court will take a 1-hour recess, all parties. We'll reconvene at 1100 hours. As the gavel came down, the courtroom erupted into whispers. Pierce's face had transformed from smugness to fury, to something that looked dangerously close to fear. He cornered his legal team, gesturing wildly, his voice a harsh whisper I couldn't quite make out. Major Collins gripped my elbow, steering me toward a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom. "What the hell just happened in there?" she demanded once the door closed behind us. "What's Operation Northern Shield? And why did Colonel Brooks look at you like you were a ghost?" I sank into one of the chairs, suddenly aware of how tired I was. 6 months of fighting Pierce's accusations, 6 months of watching my reputation being systematically dismantled, 6 months of fellow officers crossing to the other side of corridors when they saw me coming. "It's classified," I said automatically. The response drilled into me through years of debriefings and security clearances. Collins slammed her portfolio down on the table. "Not anymore, it isn't. Not if it's going to save your career. Whatever happened 6 years ago just changed everything in that courtroom. I need to know what it is." I stared at the blank wall behind her, seeing not the cream-colored paint, but the sand and blood and chaos of that day 6 years earlier. The day that had earned me a medal I couldn't wear, and a commendation I couldn't speak of. "It was supposed to stay buried," I said quietly. "That was the deal. The mission never happened. The medal doesn't exist in any public record, and I get to keep her serving." "What medal?" Collins's voice had dropped to a whisper. Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. A young sergeant entered, his face serious. Major Collins, Colonel Brooks requests your presence in his office immediately. Lieutenant Hayes is to remain here until further notice. Collins gathered her materials, giving me one last searching look. This isn't over. Whatever is happening, I'm still your attorney. She hesitated, then added, and apparently there's a lot more to you than your file suggests. After she left, I sat alone in the silent room, memories flooding back like a dam had broken. The mission, the impossible choice, the lives saved and lost, the medal ceremony held in a secured room deep beneath the Pentagon, with only 5 people present, the oath of silence that followed, and through it all, the slow-burning resentment of Harold Pierce, who had been there that day, who had given the order I disobeyed, who had watched as his star dimmed while mine, though hidden from public view, burned brighter in the eyes of those who knew the truth. The hour stretched endlessly. I tried to prepare myself for what might come next. Dismissal, disgrace, or perhaps, just perhaps, a chance at the truth finally coming to light. Either way, the carefully constructed walls around my past were crumbling, and I didn't know if I was ready for what would emerge from the rubble. 6 years earlier, I was a different person. Fresh-faced and idealistic, with only 3 years of service under my belt, I believed in the straight lines of command and the clear boundaries between right and wrong. Joint Base Andrews had been my home for 18 months, and I'd thrown myself into every assignment with the kind of enthusiasm that earned me grudging respect from superiors and genuine admiration from peers. It was a crisp autumn morning when the call came in. I remember the leaves on the base turning gold and red, the sky a perfect, unblemished blue that seemed to promise nothing but good things. I was reviewing personnel files when my direct superior, then Major Harold Pierce, appeared at my office door. "Hayes," he said, his voice clipped and urgent. "Briefing room. Now." I followed him without question, falling in step behind his rigid back as we made our way across the base. Pierce had never been warm. He wasn't the type for mentorship or encouragement, but he was efficient and by the book. I respected that about him, even if I sometimes felt his gaze linger too long on me during meetings, even if I noticed how he took credit for successful operations I'd planned. The briefing room was already filled with tense faces when we arrived. Maps of a remote mountainous region were projected on the wall, and satellite images showed what appeared to be a small compound nestled between steep cliffs. I recognized the terrain immediately. Afghanistan's northeastern border with Pakistan, some of the most unforgiving territory on Earth. "We have a situation," said Colonel Wilson, the base commander at the time. "A reconnaissance team has gone silent near the Wakhan corridor. Last communication indicates they discovered something significant, but were compromised shortly after transmission." The room felt suddenly colder as Wilson continued. "Intel suggests they're being held here." He pointed to the compound on the screen. "We have a narrow window to extract them before they're moved deeper into hostile territory. If that happens, they're as good as gone." The mission parameters were laid out with brutal efficiency. Small team would insert under cover of darkness, locate and extract the captured reconnaissance personnel, and exit before daybreak. The risks were enormous. Uncertain enemy numbers, treacherous terrain, limited air support due to diplomatic sensitivities in the region. "Lieutenant Hayes will coordinate from base," Pierce announced, and I felt a stab of disappointment. I'd been training for field ESA operations for months, pushing myself beyond every limit to prove I was ready. "Sir," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I've completed all requisite field certifications. I respectfully request to be included in the extraction team." Pierce's eyes narrowed. "Denied. You're needed here." I knew better than to push further, but Colonel Wilson was studying me thoughtfully. "Actually, Hayes's language skills could be useful on the ground. Let's add her to the team." I saw something flash across Pierce's face. Irritation, perhaps, or something darker, before he composed himself. "As you wish, sir." The next 12 hours were a blur of preparation, briefings, and equipment checks. Our team consisted of 6 operators: myself, Sergeant Connor Hayes, no relation, 2 Special Forces soldiers I'd worked with previously, and 2 seasoned Marines. Pierce would coordinate from a forward operating base 30 miles away. We inserted at 0200 hours. The helicopter's rotors barely a whisper as we rappelled into the darkness. The cold bit through my tactical gear as we moved silently across the rocky terrain. Everything went according to plan until we reached the ridge overlooking the compound. I count 12 tangos, whispered Sergeant Hayes, peering through his night vision scope. More than expected. Our intelligence had indicated 7 hostiles at most. I felt the first flutter of unease as I studied the compound layout. Something wasn't right. The guard patterns were too organized. The perimeter security too sophisticated for the local insurgent groups. I keyed my comm. Watchdog, this is Sparrow. We have elevated numbers and unexpected security protocols. Request updated intelligence. Pierce's voice crackled back, distant and broken by static. Proceed as planned, Sparrow. Clock is ticking. Sir, I recommend we reassess. This doesn't match our briefing. That's an order, Lieutenant. Execute. I exchanged glances with Sergeant Hayes, whose face reflected my own concern. But orders were orders. We began our approach, using the shadows and terrain for cover. We were 50 meters from the compound when I saw it. A subtle movement at the far corner of the building, a glimpse of something that made my blood run cold. Hold position, I whispered urgently. I'm seeing potential explosives rigged at entry points. Pierce's response was immediate and dismissive. Negative, Hayes. Your imagination is compromising the mission. Proceed now, or I'm logging this as a direct refusal of orders. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew something else, too. The lives of my team and the captured reconnaissance personnel depended on what I did next. Team, new plan, I said, switching to our backup comm channel where Pierce couldn't hear us. This is a trap. We're going to create a diversion and find another way in. What followed was the longest night of my life. A careful dance of diversion, precision, and split-second decisions. We discovered our captured teammates not in the main building, but in a hidden bunker beneath it. And we learned that the entire compound was wired to collapse. An elaborate setup designed to eliminate not just the prisoners, but any rescue team that came for them. By dawn, we had extracted all 4 reconnaissance team members, neutralized the threat, and were moving toward extraction. That's when Pierce's voice came back, crystal clear now that we were higher on the ridge. Mission abort. Return to base immediately without the packages. I froze. Sir, we have recovered all 4 personnel. They need immediate medical attention. New intelligence indicates compromised identities. Those 4 are to be considered hostile. Leave them and return to base. That is a direct order. I knew it was a lie. I could see the 4 rescued team members, Americans all, 2 of them barely conscious from their injuries and treatment during captivity. One of them was clutching a small hard drive to his chest like it contained the secrets of the universe. And in that moment, standing on that cold mountainside with lives in the balance, I made the decision that would change everything. Negative, watchdog. We are bringing our people home. The hour I spent alone in that small conference room felt like an eternity. My mind raced through the consequences of what was unfolding. 6 years of careful silence, of carrying the weight of that mission alone, were about to collapse. I'd spent so long compartmentalizing that part of my life that having it suddenly thrust into the light left me feeling exposed, vulnerable in a way I hadn't been since that night in Afghanistan. The door finally opened. Major Collins entered, her face unreadable, followed by Colonel Brooks himself. The sight of him, not as the tribunal judge, but as a man who knew my secrets, sent a jolt through me. Lieutenant Hayes, Brooks said, closing the door carefully behind him. I've just spent the past hour in a highly classified call with the Pentagon. I stood at attention, spine rigid, eyes forward. The old habits of military discipline offered a small comfort in the chaos. At ease, Lieutenant, Brooks said, his voice gentler than I had heard it in the courtroom. Please sit down. I sank into a chair, and Brooks took the seat across from me. Major Collins remained standing, clutching her portfolio like a shield. 6 years ago, Brooks began, his eyes never leaving mine. I was a major stationed at Bagram Air Base. I was coordinating intelligence for a particular region, the Wakhan Corridor. My breath caught. He had been there. Not physically on the ground with us, but in the background, one of the faceless voices in the command chain. I remember getting reports of a rescue operation gone sideways. The comms were chaotic. There was talk of a junior officer defying direct orders, of potential casualties, of a catastrophic diplomatic incident in the making. He paused, the lines around his eyes deepening. And then, 12 hours later, I watched as a helicopter landed carrying 4 men we'd all presumed dead, and the junior officer who'd brought them home against impossible odds. Major Collins looked between us, clearly trying to piece together this history she hadn't been privy to. What Commander Pierce has conveniently left out of his accusations, Brooks continued, is that he was the commanding officer who ordered you to abandon American personnel in hostile territory. He's also omitted the fact that the intelligence those 4 men carried revealed a network of double agents that reached into the highest levels of regional command, including individuals Pierce had been working closely with. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. I had known Pierce's order had been wrong, unconscionable even, but I had never known why he had given it. The pieces were finally clicking into place. Pierce's career should have ended that day, Brooks said, his voice hardening. Instead, powerful friends protected him, buried the report, and repositioned him. But they couldn't erase what you'd done. The Medal of Honor was presented in secret. Your name added to a classified list of recipients whose actions cannot be publicly acknowledged for reasons of national security. I remembered that ceremony, small, solemn, conducted in a room so deep within the Pentagon that it felt like being buried alive. I remembered the weight of the medal as it was placed around my neck, and the heavier weight of the silence that would follow. And now, I said, finding my voice at last, he's trying to finish what he, started. Destroy me before I can destroy him. Brooks nodded grimly. Pierce has been climbing the ranks, making powerful connections. He's positioned for a star within the year. Having you around, a living reminder of his greatest failure. Someone who knows what he really is, that's too dangerous for him. Major Collins finally spoke up. Colonel, with all due respect, if what you're saying is true, this entire proceeding is a sham. It's witness tampering, evidence tampering, perjury. It's worse than that, Brooks interrupted. It's treason. The word fell like a stone in still water, ripples of implications spreading outward. Pierce hadn't just been trying to save his career by ordering us to abandon those men. He had been actively working against American interests. The Pentagon is sending a special investigative team, Brooks continued. They'll be here within the hour. In the meantime, this tribunal is suspended. He looked at me directly. Lieutenant Hayes, you've been carrying this burden alone for too long. That ends today. As if on cue, the door opened again. A young lieutenant I didn't recognize entered, his face pale. Sir, Commander Pierce is gone. He cleared out his office and left the base 10 minutes ago. Brooks was on his feet instantly. Lock down the base, alert all gates. No one leaves without direct authorization from me. As the lieutenant rushed to comply, Brooks turned back to me. He knows we've figured it out. He'll be desperate now. I felt a cold certainty settle over me. He'll come for me, sir. I'm the only witness who can connect all the dots. Then we'll be ready for him, Brooks said firmly. You won't face this alone, not anymore. But as I watched him leave to coordinate the search, I knew better. Pierce had evaded justice for 6 years. He had built a web of lies so intricate that it had nearly destroyed me. And now that he was cornered, he would be more dangerous than ever. I turned to Major Collins, who was watching me, with new eyes, respect, maybe even awe, replacing the professional detachment she'd maintained until now. I need to see the evidence Pierce submitted against me, I said. All of it. Collins hesitated. Some of it was handled directly by Pierce. I never saw the original documents, only the copies he provided. That's what I'm counting on, I replied. He made a mistake somewhere. He always does. When he's confident, his arrogance blinds him. As Collins spread the case files across the table, I felt a strange calm descend. For 6 years, I'd been playing defense, always reacting to Pierce's moves. Now, finally, it was my turn to take the fight to him. And this time, I wouldn't be bound by silence. The base transformed into a hive of activity as security protocols activated. Armed guards appeared at checkpoints, vehicles were searched, and Pierce's face was distributed to every soldier with orders to detain on sight. I watched the proceedings with a detached sense of unreality, as if I were observing someone else's life spiraling into chaos. Major Collins and I had spent the last hour combing through Pierce's fabricated evidence. The scope of his deception was breathtaking. Doctored mission reports, tampered performance evaluations, witness statements that had been subtly altered to change their meaning entirely. He's good, Collins admitted grudgingly, holding a document up to the light to examine the watermark. If I didn't know what to look for, I'd never catch these discrepancies. He's had years to perfect it, I replied, studying a photograph that purportedly showed me meeting with unauthorized personnel, a photo I now recognized as being digitally altered. The question is, how far back does this go? Was he already a traitor when we were in Afghanistan, or did that mission push him over the edge? Collins set down the paper she was examining, fixing me with an intense gaze. Tell me about that night. The real story, not the redacted version. I hesitated, years of secrecy making me instinctively reluctant. But Pierce had already shattered the boundaries of classification with his betrayal. And if we were going to stop him, Collins needed to understand what we were truly dealing with. The 4 men we rescued weren't just a standard reconnaissance team, I began, lowering my voice despite the privacy of our room. They were counterintelligence, investigating rumors of a mole within our regional command structure. They'd gone dark after reporting they'd identified the leak. Collins's eyes widened. And Pierce ordered you to leave them behind. He said they'd been compromised, that they were hostiles now. But I'd seen their faces, heard them identify themselves with proper recognition codes. One of them was barely conscious, but he kept clutching a hard drive, insisting it had to reach Langley. The evidence against Pierce, Collins breathed. I nodded. Data linking him to a network of informants feeding information to various hostile groups. Not for ideology, but for money. Pierce was selling intelligence to the highest bidder. A knock at the door interrupted us. A serious-faced sergeant entered, saluting crisply. Lieutenant Hayes, Colonel Brooks requests your presence in the command center immediately. The command center was a secure facility at the heart of the base, a room filled with screens, communications equipment, and the constant hum of military machinery at work. As we entered, all eyes turned to me. I recognized the mix of expressions, curiosity, respect, and in some cases, the shamefaced look of those who had believed Pierce's lies about me. Brooks stood at the central table, surrounded by maps and security personnel. Lieutenant Hayes, we have a situation. 20 minutes ago, this was delivered to the main gate. He held up a sealed envelope. It's addressed to you personally. My name was written on the front in Pierce's distinctive handwriting, sharp, angular letters. That seemed to cut into the paper itself. Brooks handed it to me, and I felt the weight of whatever was inside, something small but solid. I tore the envelope open carefully. Inside was a small metal object and a folded note. I recognized the object instantly. It was a miniature replica of the Medal of Honor, the kind given as a commemorative token at the official ceremony. I had kept mine locked in, a small safe in my quarters, a reminder of the price of doing the right thing. With steady hands, I unfolded the note. Did you think I wouldn't be prepared? For every piece of evidence you have against me, I have 3 against you. The question is, who will the world believe? The decorated commander with an unblemished record, or the unstable lieutenant with a history of insubordination? Meet me where it began, or the next package won't be so symbolic. You have until midnight. I read it aloud, watching the faces around me harden with each word. He's bluffing, one of the security officers said confidently. We have the Pentagon team arriving any minute. His career is over. But I knew better. Pierce never bluffed. If he said he had evidence, he did, even if he had to manufacture it. And the threat in those final lines was unmistakable. Where it began, Brooks mused. He means Afghanistan? I shook my head. No, he means where it began for us, the first time I challenged his authority. I looked up, meeting Brooks's concerned gaze. The old training grounds at Langley. That's where I completed my field certification, where I first caught his attention by outscoring his record on the tactical course. Brooks immediately began issuing orders for a tactical team to secure the location, but I raised a hand to stop him. He'll see them coming, sir, and he's made it clear this is between him and me. Absolutely not, Brooks said firmly. You are not facing him alone. I stood my ground. With respect, Colonel, that's exactly what I need to do. Pierce knows me, knows how I think, how I operate. He's expecting me to bring backup, but what he's never understood is why I do what I do. He thinks I'm motivated by glory or recognition. He's never grasped that I simply cannot leave people behind. Brooks studied my face, seeing the determination there. You're talking about going in without support, without backup. That's not courage, Lieutenant. That's suicide. Not without backup, I corrected. Just without obvious backup. I need a small team, people Pierce doesn't know, positioned discreetly. And I need something else. I paused, the plan forming as I spoke. I need a wire. If Pierce is as arrogant as I think he is, he'll want to gloat, to explain how he nearly destroyed me. And when he does, we'll have him on record. For a long moment, Brooks was silent, weighing the risks. Finally, he gave a curt nod. 2 hours to prepare. A 4-person team at your disposal. But Hayes, his voice softened slightly. If this goes wrong, I can't protect you. Not even a Medal of Honor will save you if you're acting outside the chain of command. I smiled grimly. With respect, sir. That's never stopped me before. As the room burst into activity, selecting teams, members gathering equipment, developing contingency plans, I felt a strange sense of peace. For 6 years, Pierce had been haunting me, a shadow at the edges of my life. Now, finally, I was walking into the darkness to confront him. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one carrying secrets when the sun rose. Dusk was settling over the training grounds when I arrived, the facility a skeleton of its former self. After budget cuts 3 years ago, this particular corner of Langley had been largely abandoned, the tactical courses relocated to newer facilities across the base. What remained were concrete structures overgrown with ivy, obstacle courses slowly surrendering to nature, and the ghosts of countless military careers forged in sweat and determination. I parked my vehicle at the designated spot, a half-mile from where I expected Pierce to be waiting. The communications device in my ear was nearly invisible, the wire running beneath my civilian clothes undetectable unless someone was looking for it. I wasn't in uniform. This wasn't official military business anymore. This was personal. Testing communications, I murmured, adjusting the small microphone hidden at my collar. Clear signal, came the response from Sergeant Rivera, the communications specialist Brooks had assigned to my makeshift team. We have your location. Team is in position. The team consisted of 4 people I'd never worked with before, faces Pierce wouldn't recognize. They had spread out around the perimeter of the old training ground, positioned to intercept Pierce if he tried to flee or to intervene if things went south. Remember, I said quietly as I began walking toward the rendezvous point, no move unless I give the signal. Pierce is smart and paranoid. If he senses a trap, he'll vanish, and we'll never get another chance. Understood, Lieutenant, Rivera replied. We're ghosts until you need us. The path to the sniper tower was overgrown now, but my feet remembered the way. 6 years ago, I had set a course record here that still stood, a fact that had first put me on Pierce's radar. He had been the previous record holder, and my achievement had bruised his ego in a way I hadn't fully appreciated at the time. Looking back, perhaps that had been the beginning of his resentment, the first seed of the hatred that would grow into something so toxic. The tower loomed. Ahead, a skeletal structure silhouetted against the darkening sky. Once used to train spotters and snipers in urban terrain tactics, it now stood empty, its windows broken, its purpose forgotten. But not tonight. Tonight it would serve one final mission. I approached cautiously, scanning for any sign of movement. The ground floor was empty, dust undisturbed except for a single set of footprints, leading toward the stairs. Pierce had arrived before me as I expected. He would want the high ground, the tactical advantage of seeing me approach. I'm entering the structure, I whispered. Target is likely on the upper level. Confirmed, Rivera responded. Team is holding position. The stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended, each step a deliberate choice. I was walking into the lion's den, facing a man who had spent years plotting my destruction. Yet I felt strangely calm, focused in a way I hadn't been since Afghanistan. This was what I had trained for. Not just the physical challenges of military service, but the moral ones. The moments when right and wrong stood in stark relief against the gathering darkness. I reached the top floor, and there he was, Commander Harold Pierce, standing by the broken window that overlooked the abandoned training course. He was in civilian clothes, but his military bearing was unmistakable. He turned as I entered, and the smile that spread across his face chilled me to the bone. Lieutenant Hayes, he said, his voice eerily cordial. Punctual as always. Some habits die hard, don't they? Cut the pleasantries, Pierce, I replied, remaining near the doorway. You wanted me here. I'm here. What now? He chuckled, a sound devoid of any real humor. Always direct. That was your problem, you know. No finesse. No understanding of the delicate games that real power requires. Is that what you were playing in Afghanistan? A game? My voice remained steady despite the anger flaring inside me. When you ordered me to leave American soldiers to die? I was protecting assets worth far more than 4 expendable operatives. Pierce shot back, his facade of civility slipping. Do you have any idea what kind of intelligence networks I had built? The information pipelines that took years to cultivate? Your self-righteous heroics destroyed operations that were saving countless lives. By selling American secrets to the highest bidder? I took a step forward. That's not intelligence work, Pierce. That's treason. His eyes narrowed. Such a limited perspective. The world isn't divided into neat categories of allies and enemies, Hayes. There are interests, assets, and liabilities. Those 4 men had become liabilities. You should have followed orders. I followed my oath, I countered. The same one you betrayed. Something dark flickered across his face. And where has that gotten you? 6 years of watching your back, of being passed over for promotion, of whispers following you through every corridor. I've been systematically dismantling your career piece by piece, and you never even saw it coming until it was too late. I saw it, I said quietly. I just didn't understand why. Not until today. Pierce moved away from the window, circling slowly like a predator. Because you were a threat. Not just because of what you knew about Afghanistan, but because of who you are. People like you, with your rigid moral compass and your uncompromising loyalty, you're dangerous to people like me who see the bigger picture. And what picture is that? A world where power is the only real currency. He replied, his voice taking on a fervent quality. Where those smart enough to seize it make the rules. I've spent my career building connections, leveraging secrets, positioning myself where real decisions are made. Another year, maybe 2, and I'd have had my star. Access to intelligence few can even imagine. I let him talk, knowing every word was being transmitted to the team outside. Pierce had always loved the sound of his own voice, especially when he thought he was winning. His arrogance would be his undoing. It's over, Pierce, I said calmly. Colonel Brooks knows everything. The Pentagon has launched an investigation. There's nowhere left to run. He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. You still don't get it, do you? People like me don't run. We have contingencies. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device that looked like a sophisticated phone. Right now, I have access to accounts that would make me wealthy beyond imagination in any number of countries that would be happy to host me. I have documentation implicating several high-ranking officials in my activities. Insurance, you might call it. One call, and they'll insure this. Investigation disappears. Then why am I here? I asked, watching him carefully. If you have all these escape routes, why risk meeting me at all? His smile thinned. Loose ends. You're the one variable I couldn't control. The one mistake I couldn't quite erase. He sighed theatrically. It's almost poetic, really. The hero and the traitor, meeting where it all began. But only one of us is leaving this tower haze. As he spoke, his hand moved to his waistband, where I glimpsed the outline of a handgun. My training kicked in instantly. Assess, decide, act. Team, move in, I said clearly. Armed suspect, preparing to engage. Pierce's eyes widened in momentary surprise, then narrowed in fury as he realized I wasn't alone. He pulled the gun, but I was already moving, diving to the side as he fired. The bullet splintered the wood behind where I had been standing. I rolled behind a decaying desk, drawing the sidearm I'd been authorized to carry. You brought backup, Pierce snarled. How predictable. Always by the book, even when you're breaking the rules. Surrender, Pierce, I called out. The building is surrounded. There's no way out. There's always a way out. He replied, his voice suddenly calm again. That's the difference between us, Hayes. You see obstacles, I see opportunities. Before I could respond, there was a deafening explosion from the floor below. The entire tower shuddered, dust and debris raining down as support beams groaned in protest. What have you done? I shouted over the noise of splintering wood and crumbling concrete. Pierce's laugh floated through the chaos. Insurance policy. If I can't leave, no one does. This whole structure is coming down in less than 2 minutes. I heard shouting through my earpiece. Rivera coordinating the team's response, calling for emergency services. But I knew there wasn't time for help to arrive. The floor beneath me was already shifting, threatening to give way entirely. Through the swirling dust, I saw Pierce moving toward a rope I hadn't noticed before, secured to one of the few remaining solid beams and extending out the window. He'd planned this all along, a final escape route while burying me in the rubble. Goodbye, Lieutenant, he called, gripping the rope. Consider this your burial with full military honors. I raised my weapon, but another section of floor collapsed, forcing me to scramble for stable ground. Pierce seized the moment, launching himself out the window, sliding down the rope toward the ground below. I had seconds to decide. Try to follow him and risk the collapsing building claiming us both, or find another way out. As the decision crystallized, I heard Rivera's voice, desperate in my ear. Lieutenant, East stairwell is still intact. Move now. I holstered my weapon and ran for the door, the floor disintegrating behind me with each step. Whatever happened next, Pierce wouldn't escape. Not this time. The truth was already out there, being transmitted to Brooks and the Pentagon team with every word Pierce had spoken. As I raced down the crumbling stairs, a strange thought surfaced through the adrenaline and chaos. Sometimes survival itself is victory enough. The old training tower collapsed with a roar that echoed across the abandoned grounds, sending a cloud of dust billowing into the night sky. I emerged from the eastern stairwell seconds before it gave way, diving clear of the falling debris. Pain lanced through my shoulder as I hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. For a moment, I lay there in the dirt, coughing as dust filled my lungs, the ringing in my ears drowning out all other sound. Then hands were gripping me, pulling me to my feet. Sergeant Rivera's face swam into focus, his mouth moving with words I couldn't yet hear. I shook my head, pointing to my ears, and he nodded in understanding, guiding me away from the devastation toward the perimeter where medical personnel were already arriving. As the ringing subsided, sound returned in fragments, shouted orders, radio chatter, the distant wail of sirens. I turned back to look at the collapsed tower, now nothing but a pile of rubble and twisted metal. "Pierce?" I managed to ask, my voice hoarse from dust and smoke. Rivera's expression was grim. Team 2 has eyes on him. He made it down the rope, has a vehicle stashed about a quarter-mile west. They're in pursuit but maintaining distance per your orders. I nodded, wincing as a medic began examining my shoulder. "Keep tracking him. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. He's still armed and now he's desperate." "Yes, Lieutenant," Rivera replied, relaying the instructions through his comms unit. The medic finished her assessment, informing me that my shoulder was likely dislocated, but not broken. The pain was a dull throb now, manageable with the adrenaline still coursing through my system. "I need to get back to base," I told her, attempting to stand. "Not until I stabilize that shoulder," she insisted, her tone brooking no argument. "Colonel's orders." I submitted to her ministrations, my mind racing ahead. Pierce had revealed more than he intended in that tower. He'd mentioned documentation implicating others, offshore accounts, contingency plans. If we could access that information, we could potentially uncover an entire network of corruption within the military hierarchy. A military police vehicle pulled up, and Colonel Brooks himself stepped out, his face set in lines of concern and determination. He strode directly to where I sat being treated. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I should court-martial you for this stunt." "Yes, sir," I acknowledged. "But did you get the transmission?" His expression softened slightly. Every damning word. Pierce didn't just implicate himself, he named names. High-ranking officers, intelligence officials, foreign contacts. The Pentagon team is already moving on that information. And Pierce? Still on the run, but he won't get far. Every law enforcement agency in the region has been alerted. Border Patrol, airports, train stations, all on high alert. He's toxic now, Lieutenant. Even his so-called insurance policies won't help him. The medic finished securing my arm in a sling, giving me instructions I barely registered. As soon as she moved away, I stood, ignoring the pain. That shot through my shoulder. "I need to be there when they bring him in," I said. Brooks studied me for a long moment before nodding. "You've earned that much. But from now on, you follow protocol to the letter. No more lone wolf heroics. Clear?" "Crystal, sir." We were about to leave when Rivera rushed over, his expression urgent. "Colonel, Lieutenant, we've got a situation. Pierce has, barricaded himself in an old munitions bunker half a mile from here. Says he'll only surrender to Lieutenant Hayes." Brooks immediately began shaking his head. "Absolutely not. He's already tried to kill you once tonight." "With respect, sir," I countered. "This may be our best chance to bring him in alive, with all the intelligence he possesses intact." "It's clearly a trap," Brooks argued. Of course it is," I agreed. "But it's a trap where we set the terms." 20 minutes later, I stood outside the entrance to the long-abandoned munitions bunker, a relic from an earlier era of Langley's history. Special Forces operators had taken positions surrounding the area, snipers covering every potential exit. I wore a tactical vest despite my injured shoulder, a precaution Brooks had insisted. And upon "Pierce?" I called out, my voice echoing in the darkness. "It's Hayes. You wanted to talk? Let's talk." Silence stretched for several seconds before his voice responded, strained and hollow from within the concrete structure. "Just you, Hayes. Anyone else tries to enter and I detonate what's left of this place." "No explosives left in there," I replied calmly. "This bunker was decommissioned 15 years ago. They cleared everything out." A bitter laugh echoed from the darkness. Always so confident. But are you willing to bet your life on that assessment? Or the lives of those men surrounding us right now? I took a deep breath, considering my options. Pierce was cornered, desperate, the most dangerous kind of adversary, but also the kind most likely to make mistakes. "I'm coming in," I announced, ignoring the protests in my earpiece. "Alone, as requested." I stepped toward the entrance, the heavy steel door hanging partially open. As I crossed the threshold, I switched on the tactical light attached to my vest, illuminating a narrow corridor leading deeper into the bunker. "Keep walking," Pierce's voice directed from somewhere ahead. "All the way to the main chamber." I moved forward cautiously, alert for any sign of tripwires or improvised devices. The walls were bare concrete, damp with condensation and age. After about 30 meters, the corridor opened into a larger chamber, what had once been the main storage area for munitions. Pierce stood in the center, illuminated by a small lantern he had placed on the floor. He looked different, now disheveled, his composure finally cracking. The gun in his hand was pointed directly at my chest. "That's far enough," he said, his voice unnaturally calm for a man whose world was collapsing. "You know, I almost admire your persistence, Hayes. Almost." "It's over, Pierce," I said simply, stopping just inside the chamber. "The recordings from the tower have already been transmitted to Washington. Special Forces teams are moving against your contacts as we speak. Whatever leverage you thought you had is gone." His smile was tight, almost pained. "Not quite everything. I still have one card to play." He reached slowly into his pocket with his free hand, withdrawing a small metal object that gleamed in the lantern light. My Medal of Honor. The real one, not the replica he had sent to the base. "Found this in your quarters," he said, watching my reaction carefully. Amazing what access a commander can get when he cites national security concerns. "I've been planning this for longer than you realize." I kept my expression neutral, though the sight of him holding my medal, the symbol of everything I had sacrificed and endured, sent a surge of anger through me. "What's your play? Here, Pierce? That medal won't buy you freedom." "No," he agreed, "but it might buy me a better deal. You see, I know things, Hayes. Names, operations, secrets that would shake the foundations of national security if they came to light. The kind of intelligence that makes prosecutors willing to negotiate." I took a step forward, careful to keep my movements slow and non-threatening. "There won't be any deals. Not after what you've done." "We'll see," he replied, his finger tightening slightly on the trigger of his gun. "But first, I want to know something. All these years, all the obstacles I put in your path, why didn't you break? Anyone else would have resigned, taken a civilian job, walked away with their sanity intact. Why stay and fight a battle you couldn't possibly win?" The question caught me off guard. Of all the things Pierce might have wanted to know in what could be his final moments of freedom, this seemed oddly personal. I studied his face, seeing something I hadn't noticed before, a genuine bewilderment, as if my persistence was a puzzle he had never been able to solve. "Because it was never about winning," I answered truthfully. "It was about doing what was right, regardless of the cost. Something you wouldn't understand." A flicker of something, regret, bitterness, crossed his face. "No, I suppose I wouldn't," he sighed, the gun wavering slightly in his hand. "We could have been quite a team, you know. Your field skills, my strategic mind. Unstoppable. We were never on the same side, Pierce." "Not really." His expression hardened again. "No. And now, here we are, the hero and the villain, at the final confrontation. Very theatrical." He tossed my medal toward me. It clattered to the concrete floor between us. "Pick it up. You've earned it, after all." I recognized the ploy immediately. Get me to bend down. Make myself vulnerable. "You first. Put the gun down, and we both walk out of here alive." For a moment, I thought he might actually consider it. Then his face twisted with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful in its completeness. "I'd rather die than surrender to you," he spat. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Pierce raised his gun, not at me, but to his own head. I lunged forward, my training overriding everything else. The need to preserve life, even his, even after everything. My injured shoulder screamed in protest as I collided with him, knocking his arm upward as the gun discharged. The bullet ricocheted off the concrete ceiling, fragments showering down around us as we crashed to the floor. We struggled, his desperate strength against my trained precision. Despite the pain, despite the history between us, I maintained control, forcing the gun from his hand. It skittered across the floor as I pinned him down, my knee in his back, securing his wrists despite his struggles. "It's over," I repeated, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Commander Harold Pierce, you are under arrest for treason, attempted murder, and a list of charges so long it'll take the JAG Corps a week just to process the paperwork." As Special Forces operators flooded into the bunker, securing Pierce and the scene, I stepped back, suddenly exhausted. Colonel Brooks appeared at my side, concern evident in his expression. "You all right, Lieutenant?" I nodded, my gaze fixed on Pierce as they led him away in handcuffs. "Yes, sir. I think I finally am." Brooks bent down and picked up my Medal of Honor from where it had fallen during the struggle. He handed it to me with a solemn respect that needed no words. As I closed my fingers around the medal, I felt something shift within me, the weight of 6 years of silence, of carrying a burden alone, finally beginning to lift. Whatever came next, the truth was out. And sometimes, that's all the victory you need. 3 weeks after Pierce's arrest, I found myself back in a military courtroom. This time, however, everything was different. The room was filled with sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating faces that now regarded me with respect rather than suspicion. My dress blues felt comfortable again, the weight of my service ribbons a source of pride rather than burden. The tribunal that had been convened to court-martial me had been dissolved, replaced by a formal hearing to officially clear my record of all false allegations. Colonel Brooks presided, flanked by 2 generals whose presence signified the gravity with which the Pentagon was treating the matter. Major Collins sat beside me, no longer as my defense counsel, but as a witness to the proceedings. She had spent the weeks since Pierce's arrest helping investigators untangle the web of fabricated evidence he had woven against me. Her dedication had gone far beyond professional obligation, evolving into a friendship I hadn't expected but deeply valued. "Lieutenant Natalie Hayes," Colonel Brooks announced, his voice carrying through the packed courtroom. "This hearing has reviewed all evidence previously presented against you by Commander Harold Pierce. We have determined that said evidence was falsified, manipulated, or coerced as part of a systematic campaign to discredit you following your actions during Operation Northern Shield." A murmur rippled through the assembled officers and personnel. Operation Northern Shield was no longer classified, at least not the parts involving Pierce's treason and my actions to save the reconnaissance team. The Pentagon had made the calculated decision to release enough information to clear my name while keeping sensitive operational details secured. Furthermore, Brooks continued, "This hearing acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances that led to your receipt of the Medal of Honor, and recognizes that the classification of said honor placed you in an untenable position when facing accusations you could not fully defend against without violating security protocols." I sat perfectly still, maintaining my composure despite the emotion welling inside me. 6 years of doubt, of whispers behind my back, of watching my career stagnate while others were promoted. All of it was finally being addressed in the light of day. By unanimous decision of this panel, all charges against Lieutenant Hayes are hereby expunged from her record. All reprimands, notations, and evaluations influenced by Commander Pierce's campaign are to be struck. Lieutenant Hayes's record will reflect her true service history, including appropriate recognition of her actions during Operation Northern Shield. Brooks paused, looking directly at me with something like paternal pride. "Lieutenant Hayes, please rise." I stood, my injured shoulder still in a sling but healing. "Well, in light of the extraordinary circumstances of your service, your unwavering dedication to duty despite personal cost, and upon review of your complete service record as it should have been maintained, this panel recommends your immediate promotion to the rank of captain, with consideration for accelerated advancement to major within the next fiscal year." The room erupted in applause, spontaneous, genuine, and thunderous. I blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that threatened to break through my professional demeanor. Major Collins squeezed my arm gently, her own eyes suspiciously bright. As the applause died down, Brooks added, "This hearing is adjourned. Captain Hayes, please remain for the formal promotion ceremony, which will commence in 30 minutes. As people, I began filing out. Many stopped to congratulate me, some offering apologies for having believed Pierce's lies. I accepted both with grace, understanding that they too had been victims of his manipulation in different ways. Sergeant Connor Hayes, still no relation, approached with a broad smile. He had been one of the few who had stood by me, risking his own career to provide testimony about Pierce's falsified reports. "Never doubted you for a second, ma'am," he said, offering a crisp salute. "Liar?" I replied with a smile, returning his salute before pulling him into a quick embrace. "But I appreciate the sentiment." "What happens now?" he asked as we separated. "With Pierce, I mean." My smile faded slightly. "Military tribunal, closed to the public due to the classified nature of his crimes. But from what I hear, he's already trying to cut a deal, offering names, operations, anything to reduce his sentence." "Will it work?" I shrugged my good shoulder. "Partially, maybe. The intelligence community wants what he knows. But treason isn't something the military takes lightly. He'll never wear a uniform again, never hold a position of authority. That's something, at least." Connor nodded, seemingly satisfied. "And you? After the promotion ceremony?" That was the question I'd been asking myself since the night in the bunker. With my name cleared, my rank restored and advanced, my future in the military was suddenly wide open again. The path I had always envisioned for myself was once more within reach, but something had changed within me during those 6 years of fighting shadows. I had seen the cost of blind loyalty, the danger of unquestioned authority. I had learned that sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone against the very institution you had sworn to serve. "I've been offered a position with the Inspector General's office," I told him, "investigating allegations of misconduct within the chain of command, ensuring that what happened to me doesn't happen to others." Connor's eyebrows rose. "Watchdog duty? That won't make you popular." "I'm not looking for popularity," I replied. "Just purpose." Before he could respond, Major Collins approached, elegant in her dress uniform. "They're ready for you in the ceremonial hall, Captain," she said, emphasizing my new rank with a smile. As I followed her through the corridors of the base, I found myself thinking about the long journey that had brought me here. From that cold mountainside in Afghanistan to this moment of vindication, I had held on to one simple truth. Doing the right thing was never the easy choice, but it was the only one I could live with. The ceremonial hall was packed with high-ranking officers, fellow soldiers, and even a small contingent from the Pentagon. As I walked to the center of the room, I saw faces I recognized from Operation Northern Shield, survivors of the reconnaissance team I had refused to abandon. They stood together, their presence a silent testimony to the choices I had made that night. Colonel Brooks performed the promotion ceremony with formal dignity, removing my lieutenant's bars and replacing them with the captain's insignia. As he pinned the new rank to my uniform, he spoke quietly, for my ears alone. "Your father would be proud, Captain Hayes." I swallowed hard, thinking of my father who had died during my second year at West Point. A career military man, he had taught me the true meaning of service and honor long before I ever put on a uniform. "Thank you, sir," I whispered back. As the ceremony concluded and the formal reception began, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers, including several generals eager to discuss my future prospects. I navigated the conversations with diplomatic skill, accepting congratulations while deflecting questions about the classified details of Pierce's case. Eventually, I managed to slip away for a moment of quiet, finding refuge in a small anteroom adjacent to the main hall. I needed space to process everything that had happened, to acknowledge the journey and prepare for what came next. I was startled from my thoughts by a soft knock at the door. A woman in civilian clothes entered, Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, the military psychologist who had been assigned to evaluate me following the incident at Langley. "Captain Hayes," she greeted me warmly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Doctor," I assured her, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. "Just taking a moment to breathe." She sat down, studying me with professional interest. "How are you feeling?" And I'm asking as your doctor, not as a courtesy. I considered the question seriously. "Vindicated, relieved, uncertain about the future, but in a good way, I think." She nodded. "All perfectly normal responses. You've been through an extraordinary ordeal. Not just the recent events, but the years of isolation and doubt that preceded them. Recovery from that kind of experience isn't linear." "I'm not sure recovery is the right word," I replied thoughtfully. "I'm not the same person I was before all this happened. I'm not sure I want to recover that version of myself." Dr. Morgan smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "That's actually a very healthy perspective, Captain. Growth often comes from our most challenging experiences. The question is, how will you use what you've learned?" I thought about the position with the Inspector General, about the opportunity to ensure that power was never again abused the way Pierce had abused his. about the chance to be a voice for those who might otherwise go unheard within the rigid hierarchy of military structure. By remembering, I said finally, by never forgetting what it feels like to stand alone against a system that's supposed to protect you, and by making sure others don't have to face that alone. As Dr. Morgan and I continued our conversation, discussing the path forward and the support systems I would need, I felt a sense of purpose solidifying within me. Pierce had tried to destroy me because I represented everything he had betrayed: honor, integrity, the willingness to sacrifice personal gain for the greater good. In fighting to survive his campaign, I had only become more committed to those values. Outside the anteroom, I could hear the reception continuing. Laughter, conversation, the sounds of careers advancing, and connections being made. Soon I would return to that world, take my place in it with new rank and renewed purpose. But for now, in this quiet moment of reflection, I acknowledged the truth that would guide whatever came next. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones no one sees. The battles fought not for glory or recognition, but simply because they're right. And those are the victories worth every sacrifice. 6 months after my promotion to captain, I stood once again before a military tribunal. This time, however, I wasn't the accused. I was the primary witness against Commander Harold Pierce in his court-martial for treason, conspiracy, falsification of military records, and attempted murder. The courtroom was sealed, the proceedings classified due to the sensitive nature of the evidence being presented. Only those with the highest security clearances were permitted to attend. Among them sat the 4 members of the reconnaissance team from Operation Northern Shield, now allowed to testify publicly about what had occurred that night in Afghanistan. Pierce sat at the defense table, his posture rigid, his face a mask of cold calculation. He had traded his commander's uniform for the plain clothes of a prisoner awaiting judgment. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he had refused all plea deals that would require a full confession. His military attorney looked resigned, aware that they were fighting a losing battle against the mountain of evidence I had helped compile. As I took the witness stand, Pierce's eyes locked onto mine. I expected to see hatred. There, perhaps a final flash of the arrogance that had defined him throughout our history. Instead, I saw something more disturbing: emptiness. As if the man who had orchestrated years of deception and betrayal had retreated inside himself, leaving only a shell behind. The military prosecutor, Colonel Jacobs, approached the stand. "Captain Hayes, please describe for the court your first encounter with Commander Pierce in a combat situation." For the next 2 hours, I methodically recounted everything, from that first mission in Afghanistan to the night at Langley when Pierce had tried to bury both me and the evidence of his crimes. I spoke clearly and dispassionately, presenting facts rather than emotion. The transcript of Pierce's confession in the tower, captured by my wire, had already been entered into evidence, but my testimony provided the context needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal. Throughout my testimony, Pierce remained impassive, though I noticed his attorney making fewer objections as the hours wore on. The evidence was simply too overwhelming to contest. When Colonel Jacobs finished his questions, Pierce's attorney declined to cross-examine me. It was a tacit admission that challenging my account would only strengthen the case against his client. As I was dismissed from the witness stand, I passed close to Pierce's table. He spoke, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "It should have been you, Hayes. You should have broken years ago." I paused, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the night in the bunker. "That was, always your mistake, Pierce. You never understood what you were really fighting against." I left him there, surrounded by the consequences of his choices, and walked out of the courtroom with my back straight and my head high. I didn't need to stay for the verdict. We all knew what it would be. Outside, Major Collins was waiting, now Lieutenant Colonel Collins following her own promotion. "How did it go?" she asked, falling into step beside me as we walked across the base. "As expected," I replied. "He's finished." She nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "The new team at the IG's office is making progress on the network he built. 3 colonels have been quietly retired, and there's an ongoing investigation into contacts at the Pentagon. The Inspector General's office had become my new home in the months since my promotion. The work was challenging and often thankless. Investigating allegations of misconduct within the military's own ranks was never going to win popularity contests. But it mattered. It was necessary. And I was good at it. "Any word on the Richardson case?" I asked, referring to a sergeant who had reported supply theft by his commanding officer only, to find himself facing trumped-up disciplinary charges. Your report convinced them to open a formal investigation, Collins replied. The CO has been temporarily relieved pending the outcome. Richardson has been reassigned to protect him from retaliation. I felt a small surge of satisfaction. Each case like this was a step toward the kind of military I had always believed in, one where integrity mattered more than rank, where doing the right thing wasn't punished. We reached the small park at the center of the base, where a ceremony was already underway. Today, Sergeant Connor Hayes was being awarded the Bronze Star for his actions during a recent deployment. I had made sure to be back from Washington in time to see it. We stood at the back of the gathered crowd, watching as the base commander pinned the medal to Connor's chest. His face was solemn but proud as he accepted the honor. In the front row, his family watched with tear-filled eyes, his wife holding their infant daughter, his parents standing tall with unmistakable pride. After the ceremony, Connor made his way through the crowd toward us, Bronze Star gleaming against his uniform. "Captain Hayes," he greeted me with a salute, which I returned before embracing him briefly. "Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you'd be tied up with the Pierce trial. And miss seeing you get the recognition you deserve? Not a chance, Sergeant." I smiled genuinely. "Congratulations. It's well earned." He glanced down at the medal, a hint of embarrassment crossing his face. "Just did my job, ma'am. Nothing special about that." "We both know that's not true," I replied seriously. "Doing your job when everything around you is going according to plan, that's expected. Doing your job when the world is falling apart around you, when the easy choice would be to run or surrender, that's what separates soldiers from heroes." Connor looked at me with sudden understanding, recognizing that I wasn't just talking about his recent actions, but also about what had happened on that mountainside in Afghanistan years ago. "Permission to speak freely, Captain?" he asked. "Always. You changed things, you know. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. The way people talk now, the way they're not afraid to question orders that don't feel right, that's because of you. Because you stood your ground when it would have been easier to give in." His words caught me off guard, touching something deep within me that I hadn't fully acknowledged. In all the months of fighting for my reputation, of seeking justice against Pierce, I had focused on personal vindication. I hadn't considered the broader impact my stand might have had on others. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "But I think you give me too much credit." Connor shook his head firmly. "Not nearly enough, ma'am." He glanced over his shoulder to where his family waited. "I should get back. My daughter's only got so much patience for military ceremonies." "Go," I said, smiling at the mention of his child. "Give them my best." As he rejoined his family, Lieutenant Colonel Collins gave me a sidelong glance. "He's right, you know. You did change things. More than you realize." I didn't respond immediately, watching as Connor lifted his daughter into his arms, her small hands reaching for the shiny new medal on his chest. The simple joy in that moment, a soldier holding his child, honored for his service, surrounded by love and respect, represented everything worth fighting for. "Maybe," I conceded finally. But it wasn't just me. It was everyone who refused to look the other way. You, Connor, Colonel Brooks, even those 4 men from the reconnaissance team who survived to tell the truth when they finally could. Collins nodded thoughtfully. "A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, but it's also true that one strong link can hold the rest together when everything else is failing." We began walking again, heading toward the administration building, where I had a meeting with the base commander to discuss improvements to the reporting process for misconduct allegations. "Any regrets?" Collins asked suddenly. "About how everything played out?" The question gave me pause. If I had kept my head down that night in Afghanistan, followed Pierce's orders to abandon those men, my career might have progressed smoothly. I might be commanding my own unit now, without the years of struggle and isolation. I might never have known what it was to stand alone against a system that had turned its back on me. But I also would never have known my own strength, never discovered the power of unwavering conviction, never experienced the profound satisfaction of knowing that, when tested, I had chosen right over easy, honor over advancement, humanity over blind obedience. "No," I said finally with absolute certainty. "No regrets." As we reached the administration building, I paused, looking back across the base to where the flag flew at full staff, snapping crisply in the morning breeze. The same flag I had sworn to defend. The same oath I had chosen to honor even when it cost me everything. You know, I said thoughtfully. When I was a lieutenant fresh out of West Point, my father told me something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said that a uniform doesn't make you a soldier, and a rank doesn't make you a leader. What matters is what you do when no one is watching. What you stand for when standing costs you everything. Colin smiled. Sounds like a wise man. He was, I agreed. And I think he would be proud. Not of the medals or the promotions, but of the choices, especially the hard ones. As we entered the building, I felt a sense of completion, of having come full circle. From the young lieutenant making a life-altering decision on a mountainside, to the captain working to ensure others would never face the same impossible choices alone. It was a journey marked by struggle, but defined by purpose. Pierce had been wrong about so many things, but perhaps his greatest error was believing that breaking me would be his victory. He never understood that some things, once tested by fire, don't break. They emerge stronger, more resolved, unbreakable. In the end, the medal that had been presented in secret, the honor that had been hidden away, wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the truth it represented, that courage isn't about fearlessness, but about feeling the fear and choosing right anyway. That integrity isn't tested when the choices are easy, but when they demand everything you have. And that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism aren't the ones that win wars or capture headlines, but the quiet, resolute moments when one person simply refuses to abandon what they know is right. No matter the cost, no matter how long the fight, no matter how unlikely the victory. For in those moments we discover who we truly are. And no power on earth can take that away.